I was a younger man, I actually worked in a retail warehouse-based setting for a certain amount of time. Little did I know that the periods of time there would have been some of the best in my life due to the people that I had met and circumstances that I later found myself in as a result of the time there. These stories are some of the memories of mine that I recollected from then, in no particular order from when they had occurred. Work during the summer at the warehouse was actually something that I enjoyed doing, as the warehouse that I worked at had an outdoor landscaping area that myself, Andrew, and Daryl were mostly stationed at. In terms of actual experience, Daryl had the most with landscaping, followed by myself, then Andrew. Daryl was an older gentleman, so he almost never got involved with the inside of the landscaping area. Always remaining outside. It wasn't a bad thing, as he knew so much about landscaping that management often let him do whatever he wanted in the outside area. He even got to know vendors as to what might have been good to sell at the warehouse, and his suggestions brought in money for the department, so everyone was happy. This particular morning it was early and hot. The sun was already in the sky and there was nothing to do in the interior of the landscaping area, and there were no customers to help, so I decided to head outside to see what could be done. He was out there watering the plants and other foliage. He nodded in response to me, and I looked around to see what I could do. He shook his head and I nodded to him, and I then took a hose, stood next to him and began to water as well. It had been a while since I last worked with Daryl during an early morning shift, and we both knew that we would have spent the entirety of our day without seeing much customers or no supervisors until much later on, so that we were essentially getting paid to stand around and do little to no work. So the both of us began to talk about the usual things, and eventually Daryl had mentioned to me that a female customer had flirted with him a few days previously during a prior early morning shift. I had a skeptical look on my face as he looked to me and spoke in response, mentioning that he could still talk to women and have said encounters with them. He mentioned that there was a female customer that had come on to him for advice, and Daryl being Daryl, he talked about everything, and eventually the woman asked him about himself, and the both of them went back and forth with a conversation for nearly an hour. I laughed as I shook my head. Daryl looked to me. He then said one of the funniest things I ever heard him say, mentioning that he could still spray the mustard, but he couldn't cut it quite as finely as he did when he was younger. I swore I had laughed so much when he said that, as he laughed as well. We both continued to water the plants, and with Daryl's comments about the mustard, I waited a few moments and then responded if he had gotten her phone number in terms of possibly communicating with her again. He mentioned that he actually did, but he looked a little worried. I stopped watering and I looked at Daryl and asked him what he was thinking about. He mentioned that she wouldn't want to see him again, and that he was an older man, at that time in his late 50s, so I asked how old she was. Daryl mentioned that in the conversation she was in her mid-40s, so I quickly reassured him that the both of them weren't young, but the both of them weren't too old either. He thanked me for helping to reassure him, but Daryl mentioned that he was a lifelong bachelor and never really wanted or had a relationship with a woman. I understood him, but I mentioned that he could still potentially see where this might go. To this day I still remember that conversation, as he never bothered to contact the woman again, nor did he ever speak about her either. Daryl was a true gentleman, and he didn't think it proper to initiate a potential relationship from such circumstances. But I often wondered what might have been if he did contact her. Perhaps the both of them could have been happy together. We'll never know now.